goes you all the way.
Good.
And also just an opportunity too for us to talk about what it means to be a key coach, what does it mean to be a part of this community of coaches, and then also just kind of thinking more broadly about how we can also speak to students and educators and people for why they need to continue to be invested in the activity of speech and debate. So, whenever are you ready?
Yeah. Jackie.
Okay.
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 You can look at it. Is that okay?
Working.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's a good sign.
It's
Okay. Okay. So if you could just tell us each individually your name, your school affiliation, and also how long you've been associated with speech and debate.
I'm Dan Lingel. I'm one of the co-directors at Jesuit College Prep in Dallas. I'm on my 21st year at Jesuit Dallas. Before that, I did 4 years of coaching at Illinois State, debated for the University of Kansas, and then debated for Freeport High School in Freeport, Illinois. So I've been involved with debate for over 30 plus years. So.
I'm Tracy MacFarland. I am also a co-director at Jesuit College Prep in Dallas. I've been affiliated with Jesuit Debate for about half of my life because Dan took the job when I was 19 and I'm 40 now, so I've been helping coach there since I was 19. I debated at Baylor University and grew up outside of Kansas City and debated at Raytown South High School, so I guess I'm 8 years less than him in terms of debate. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I like to think that no one sticks with debate that long or anything that long if they don't have some kind of affinity toward it. So if you can kind of go back through your mentor Rolodex to when it all started, how did you each get involved in debate? Do you remember that first day, the first moment, and invitation?
I think like a lot of people, had an 8th grade speech coach. I took an intro to speech class as a requirement when I was in middle school, and she told me that I would be good at debate. And so I think a lot of people have that kind of common origin story of somebody telling them that they think that they'd be good at it. So when I got to high school, I in fact started up on the debate team and then have kind of stuck ever since. And actually, before my senior year of high school, I went to a debate workshop at Wake Forest University where Dan and I actually met, where scandalously he was my lab leader. 23 years on, nobody really remembers that part of it. Anyway, when I went to workshop at Wake Forest, that was really kind of the first moment where I understood that there was this wider debate community than just Kansas City, Missouri, where I had grown up, and that there was, an option of debating in college, and that could help me to pay for college, and that could then, shape the rest of my life. So.
I actually started debating my freshman year in high school, and then my family moved to Freeport, and Freeport, Illinois is one of the sites of
Home of the pretzels.
Home of the pretzels, and it's one of the sites of the famous Lincoln Douglas debates. In fact, the one that everybody talks about the most in history actually happened in Freeport. And so I had debated a little bit, and then my family moved to the new district, and the new district had a very dynamic debate coach. His name was Ed Finch, and he had actually judged me at the school I was at previously, and encouraged me to debate, and my parents encouraged me to debate, and so the rest is history. And then I went to the University of Kansas for summer workshop, and Kansas is just one of those places where debate's in the water, and debate family is in the water, and so once I had experienced that summer workshop, I was hooked for life. It's one of the reasons I went there for college. So.
Could you all speak to maybe experiences that stand out, as memorable experiences that stand out both as participating in the activity, but also as coaches? What are there some things that just kind of like, I am glad I had that moment. And it could be good or bad. Did they push you? Clearly, they helped you to get to where you are now.
That's a difficult question, in part because there are so many. I think that, part of what I say to the debaters sometimes, that part of what keeps me doing debate is that kind of literally every day I learned something new about something, about how people operate, about arguments, about current events, about something. But I actually think that some of my most memorable experiences in debates are the ones that are like kind of painful. So when I was in college, when I was a junior at the NDT, the College National Tournament, I ended up debating in 7 of 8 of the rounds, first rounds or former first rounds, and still managed in round 8 to be in a break round, which we lost, of course, but it was still growing experience to know that I could actually be competitive, so that even if the result isn't quite what I wanted, I still was able to kind of grow from that experience. And then since I've been coaching, Texas has a very, very competitive state debate tournament. It's very difficult to qualify for. And in 2010, we actually closed out the state tournament, which was the second time that had been done in the 40-year history of the tournament. So, but the thing that made me the happiest or proudest in that moment was after everyone had cleared out the room. I'm getting misty. After everyone had cleared out the room, we just sort of all celebrated.
Yeah, I think for me, a couple of things. I consider myself a little bit, both because of my age and the fact that I debated at Kansas and did graduate work at Wake Forest and those kind of things, that I was a little bit of a Forrest Gump of debate. And what I mean by that is, my senior year, we were the 17th first round at large, and there were 2 Kansas teams that were ahead of us in the top 16. And that was before third teams were allowed to the NDT. And in fact, we were 17th that year, and the third team from the University of Michigan was 18th or 19th. And it was literally because of that season that the NDT then changes just a couple of years later and allows the third team. And it was kind of cool to be hey, you are partially responsible. They were hey, if the 17th and 19th teams aren't at the NDT, something's wrong maybe with the NDT. And then, right, and then, I happened to also be a witness to the first dispositional counterplan, the debate between the University of Kentucky and Eastern Illinois. I was assigned to scout. That happened at the Heart of America. And I was assigned to scout Kentucky for all of their debates, and so I was basically Kentucky's groupie that weekend, and got to witness the first dispositional counterplan. I actually judged the critique the second time it was run by the University of Texas at Northern Iowa when I was coaching at Illinois State, and those things. And so I think for me, growing up in the land of Lincoln and going to be a Jayhawk and a Demon Deacon, and then having my own program. Again, I'm getting a little misty, is just the whole idea of trying to recreate that family experience and recreate that sort of moment of history. We say to our debaters every year at the start of the year, there are 2 types of history you can make. History for you, something you've never experienced before, qualifying for the, winning your first debate, getting to your first elim, qualifying for the state tournament, winning a tournament, those things, and then trying to make history for the program, things the program has never done before. And I think those 2 things are a constant motivation for me. How can I help both an individual student make their personal history, and how can I help my institution continue to grow and be something that, contributes to the whole community.
Amen.
Amen. Well, that's insightful. Maybe if we could, let's talk a little bit about you all's history, and how did that come about, and how do I would think most people probably watching this or listening to this would say, working together, co-directors. I mean, everything about that sounds like no way, no how that can't work. How do you make it work? How does that function? But more importantly, like I said, how did it first start, and how do you continue to make it work?
So like I said a little bit ago, before my senior year of high school, I went to Wake Forest for a workshop, and Dan was my lab leader. In the span of the 3 weeks that I was at Wake, I had had some personal things that happened that meant that Dan, kind of reached out to be supportive of me, and that was the start. And then when
I was coaching at Illinois State, and she was debating for Baylor, and so we got to see each other a lot at tournaments and those kinds of things. And
when I was during my sophomore year of college was when we actually got engaged, and then we concluded it might be good to be at least in the same state, and so a job came open at Jesuit in Dallas, even though I was in Waco, which is about an hour and a half away. So Dan interviewed for that job, and actually at the time, kind of everybody, including us, and the administration at the school, who almost didn't hire him, thought that he would only be there for the 2 years while I was finishing college, and then I would go off to graduate school or I would go off to law school, and he would come, wherever I would be. Because certainly wasn't a plan to continue to coach in high school, I don't think, since he had coached at Illinois State. But life happens, and I finished college, took a year off to decide whether I wanted to do graduate school or law school. During that time, I think Dan started to really enjoy the high school coaching environment. Once I finished with my coursework at UT, I got my PhD at UT. Once I finished the coursework there, a job came open at Jesuit teaching government and international relations and comparative politics. Conveniently my fields in graduate school, and I knew what a special place Jesuit was from having coached there. Went to tournaments during that whole time. And so then I took the job there, and that was 13 years ago. So, and go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as far as the interactions go, I think it's actually one of our pluses, both, being married and in a relationship, how that spills over into coaching. There are times when we don't even have to say something to each other, and somebody's immediately, handling some logistics or handling up on one of the teams, or, all of a sudden some cards are getting cut without it even being spoken. And I think that's one of the cool parts of, being both married and, working together. One of the probably drawbacks is, because we teach at the same place and coach together and those kind of things, we sometimes, I think, have a professionalism about ourselves, that I don't think people, we have different last names and everything, and so sometimes people don't even assume we're married because because of, the fact that, when you walk down the halls, you can't have PDAs when you're,
There's actually apparently
coaching and stuff.
There's even a couple of people at school who for a while thought we were just having an affair because we had different last names, but always seemed to be together, kind of hanging out and laughing and stuff. So
yeah, it is kind of an interesting story of the fact that the Jesuits almost didn't hire me because they didn't think I would stay. And then, I've been there 21 years now, and Tracy's been there 13 and stuff. So.
And I think we're able to do it in part because the school's supportive of us, but also, we just have regular check-ins to make sure that we're, doing what we can do to make sure we're fostering good communication and things like that. So
the worst
plus I like him also, that helps.
The worst weekends are the ones where we have to split the squad.
That's
and
true.
one of us is going one place and one is going the other. It's that's where you wish the person in that position wasn't your significant other, so that you could both be doing it together. There aren't very many weekends where one of us can take a weekend off and the other one is, out traveling and stuff. So.
Well, clearly you've had a lot of success, and it's not something that has been overlooked, and clearly been recognized by your peers, and both of you achieving the recognition of becoming key coaches and being a part of this community of key coaches. Love if both of you could speak to what that means to you. What do you think that accolade and recognition? How do you think about that?
Well, I've always, even before I started coaching in high school, when I was coaching at Illinois State, and when I was in graduate school at Wake, I would come to the Barclay Forum, partially just because I had friends in the high school community or in the college community. This was always one of those magnets for, you know, college directors and those kind of things. You know, I wanted to be introduced at the luncheon as, you know, the director of Illinois State and those kind of things. And so I always had an affinity for the key coaches. And in fact, when I was coaching at Illinois State, a guy named Jim Hunter, who was the coach at Oak Park, didn't have his key yet. And I remember one year we wore little buttons like, you know, get Jim his key. And that was considered to be like poor form. You know, you didn't campaign, you know, for keys. And so for me, you know, I've always considered, you know, key to be really the true Hall of Fame for high school debate coaches. You know, sure, the formerly known as the NFL has a Hall of Fame and other people have Hall of Fames, but you know, key coaches, because it's recognized by your peers, and because it usually is not about waiting until you're done, it's about recognizing what you're doing while you're actually in the trenches. And I think it also even compels you to do more. I know when I got mine, I felt it was kind of an obligation for me to sort of step up as both, not only as the director or co-director of my own program, but also as just like a member of the community. And there was an expectation, you know, to, you know, work in tab rooms or serve on the National Debate Coaches Association board, you know, work, you know, Tracy does amazing work with the Dallas Urban Debate Alliance.